cool.
Do you ever just do this to a dog and it heals your depression?
Hey Pizza, what's your favorite scary movie? I like that one.
Okay. What's your favorite Halloween snack? What's your favorite scary movie? Yeah, I like that answer.
Sherlock, which one of your mom's bandanas is your favorite Halloween bandana?
Oh.
Very nice. Hey Ralphie, fix your horns. What's your favorite scary movie? That's my favorite. You copycat.
I use the term loosely. I didn't audition. It's not like I worked hella weekends or anything. I'm not that bougie. But I was in charge of and a scare actor in my high school haunted house, which was my fundraiser every year. We made a lot of money doing that. People like to pay money to get scared. And it was so fun. I was literally, getting scared is a very adrenaline, like, inducing thing. But scaring, the absolute crap. I'm a little tiny kid. I'm not gonna lie. That was really fun. That was really fun. I'm not gonna lie. It might be one of the most fun I've ever had. One kid, like, this did make me sad, but there was, like, he must have been, like, 7 or something, and he was walking through, and when we would do the haunted house, we would do the first hour for, like, little kids. And then after that would be, like, the high schoolers, middle schoolers, and then, like, adults and stuff that wanted to walk through. And, like, it's really hard to, like, switch back and forth between, like, understanding, like, okay, you because little kids, you don't even have to do that much. They just look at you, and if you have something scary on, like, they're going to start crying. And I don't know, like, somebody must have just, like, walked out in front of him, fully peed his pants. And I was like, I'm so sorry. We just literally scarred this child forever. They would do crazy stuff, too. People would get, we have a sale barn in Barnesville, so some girls would go to the sale barn and would get cow intestines from when they butcher the cows, and literally we would, like, put them in jars and stuff and have them set out, and it, like, made this terrible smell too.
What?
So what's been going on?
Things have been going really well, obviously. It's been like a full 180. She's by no means a perfect dog, but a definite 180 from where she was prior to working with you and Eva. So that's been a treat. I'd say the things that she's definitely, like, aced and we're moving on from are, like, her sit stays. We've done ample training on sit stays. So she's gotten really good at that. In terms of walking and tension on leash, we're probably about, like, I'd say anywhere from 70 to 80%. Like, most of the time she's good. But there's a lot of times where she's super jacked up, and even at a higher frequency on the e-collar, she still tends to pull a little bit, but again, it's nowhere near where it was before. So one of the things I'm definitely curious about is, like, you know, are we constantly striving for perfection, or are we striving for a dog that we, that works for us kind of thing. Like it's good for me. She's pulling my arm out of the socket. She listens, she comes back on come and things like that. But she still tends to be a little bit more high energy and pull right out of the gate. So that's one thing. In terms of dog reactivity, again, like pretty much a 180. We're probably like, again, 70 to 80% on leash. We have dog reactions. And you can see her stopping herself. Like she'll get jacked. She'll sort of like square up a little. Her fur will come back up on her back and her ears will perk and she'll start to whine. But most of the time she breaks and looks up at me, almost for like, am I supposed to be looking at you or reacting to the dog? We still get probably like 90% reactivity if the dog barks, lunges towards her, any type of movement. And it's very hard to break that. She'll, like, even at a high frequency, like 30 plus, she pushes through it. She doesn't care that she's getting shocked. So I think that's the biggest piece for me. But I'd say because now I have such confidence and comfortability with her not being aggressive around dogs, it's like nowhere near as bad. So I'm not pulling on the leash. I'm not scared. So her reactions don't seem quite as aggressive either. So that's been really good. And then we've also had a couple off leash play dates that have gone extremely well. She's respectful of boundaries. She sets her boundaries. And I've never had to intervene. So
all right. So just kind of going through these things real quick. You said sit stays, obviously you got those down. Those haven't been a problem at all. Very good. So the walking and the tension, so you said 70 to 80% as far as that's concerned. Now, when you say that, you're talking without distractions even around, it's 70 to 80%.
No, that's with like distractions. People, dogs is a different story because she's a little bit more, but that's seeing other people. That's just like, she's a sniffer. So like sniffing, squirrels, anything like that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's mostly sniffing. So like fixated on a scent and pulls to it.
That makes sense. Okay. So you asked, originally, you're like, how much of that is something that we want to care about versus how much of that is, something that, we can kind of let slide. It's like, it's working for us, this, that. So the answer to that question is obviously, it's not that we're searching for perfection all the time, but we have to maintain the criteria of the things that we're asking of the dog, right? So let's say we're taking her out on the walk and, we're giving that come command. We expect her to stay with us, but she's like 70% or sorry, maybe 30% of the time or 20% of the time pulling off because she wants to go sniff a person or sniff a dog or smell that tree over there or something like that. If we're letting that slide, what that's doing is it's immediately letting her know that the commands that we're asking of her are optional. Now, do I let my dog sniff on the walk? Sometimes, do I let them? I don't really let them go up to people and stuff, but like if we're in the field or if we're at the park or something like that, I'm absolutely going to give them ample time to kind of get it out of their system. So it's not like I'm constantly restricting them of those things. And there's not even necessarily a set amount of time that I'm asking them to do those things in the first place, right? But I do want to maintain the criteria of if I am actively asking you to do that come command, I'm going to hold you to that criteria. And where we kind of see this stuff be really important is like in the short term, like right now, you're only 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that into the training. We'll see that, like you were saying, it's a 180, right? Things are so much better than they were before. So those little things that are seemingly minor will let slide. And what happens is it's a very slippery slope back to what it was before, because again, it's a diluted criteria. So the second we dilute the criteria, then it slowly starts getting even more messy, right? So I would definitely recommend that when we're actively asking that come command, if she does go to sniff, if she does go to pull off a little bit, something like that, we are getting on those things, right? And making sure that we're getting past those things. And she understands come means actively stay focused on me until you're released. And that will bleed into, again, as we get into the reactivity here, where you said, again, we're 70 to 80% better with it, right? That will help you significantly when it comes to those things. Because if she feels like when she's in the come command, if she wants to go stop and sniff that thing over there or pull a little bit towards that squirrel or go say hi to that person, she absolutely is going to feel like, given the right opportunity, right? If she no longer wants to stay in that come command and wants to react because she can't contain it anymore, she's absolutely going to do that, right? So we for sure want to get on those things. Now, one key point that I wrote down here that you mentioned, as you said, for example, with the other dog reacting at her, obviously is a tough one. We know that, obviously that's challenging for every dog, right? But you mentioned, even at a high frequency, right, it's hard to interrupt her, and you'd mentioned 30 plus for that, right? Now, obviously, Melly's kind of a tricky dog with levels because it can go literally all over the place. Like I think over the course of those like 4 sessions or so that we did, she would work anywhere from like a 10 sometimes to literally like a 90 sometimes, So because it's on such a spectrum like that, when I hear, even at a high frequency 30 plus, that immediately is something that gets into my head of we're probably underwhelming her with the corrections for the bigger things too much.
Okay.
And a consistent pattern that I see post training with dogs is that a lot of people will take this mentality: if the dog is doing better, so I'm going to decrease the level a little bit, right? If I needed to correct that reactivity at a 70 initially to get it under control, I'm going to start correcting it at a 25, right? Because in a lot of cases, it kind of works as an interrupter. You know what I mean? It lets them know, hey, knock it off, right? They typically know if they don't listen to that 25, it's going to go up from there. So they stop at that point, whatever. But the issue is, right, we'll stay on that level too much, and it'll kind of dilute the criteria of the correction then at that point, right? And the dog starts realizing, oh, these consequences are nowhere near as motivating as they used to be for this, and they're kind of staying in that range. So they start to get a little bit more daring with it again, right? And the rule of thumb with the correction is it should inhibit a behavior, not interrupt a behavior, right? And if we're using it more as that interruption, then you're going to find yourself needing to use it more and more frequently, right? And it's going to have less and less of an impact. And what's going to happen is in the big situations, it's going to cause you to need even higher of a level later, right? So anytime we're using punishment to stop behaviors, the general philosophy is that we would rather err on the side of a little higher than a little bit lower. And as the dog gets further along through the training, that level tends to actually increase as opposed to decrease. So even with my dogs at this point, when I take them out for walks, or if we go off leash in the park or anything like that, their e-collar is usually pretty cranked up as the expectation of I don't need to use it very often, right? Because they know the criteria. The criteria is always consistent. And if I do need to give a correction for something, it's usually going to be for something much bigger, right? So it's going to be, they chose to blow me off because they're distracted by the squirrel or the deer over there, right? Or, they don't really react at stuff, but, or in her case, right, she is going to actually react because there's a higher distraction dog, right? You're passing the one that's barking or something like that, right? So the little things, right, the polling, stuff like that, that's where you could still keep it in, whatever's motivating enough where it stops it. I still want it to stop it quickly and I want her to be motivated by it, but it doesn't need to be ridiculously high. But when it comes to dogs and things like that, I still want to make sure we're setting that tone of we're just totally inhibiting this, right? Okay. So we don't want to run into a lot of situations where we're essentially losing the battle, right? Where it's like, all right, we're walking, and even if she's 80% better, right? When she does start freaking out at another dog, there's no win that comes from it. You know what I mean? There's no it's kind of like we get by and it's like she's still all fired up and she's still kind of reacting a little bit, but we don't actually accomplish anything from that. We want every single time we pass by for us to go into it with the mentality of even if she is going to react, we are going to get this under control and we are going to stop.
I know Eva mentioned this during the training sessions. I have a lot of people who just let their dogs off leash around here. So we've had a couple of situations where dogs have run up to her while she's on leash, they're off leash, but she's been amazing. And I've also had a couple situations now too, where dogs on leash while she's on leash have run up to her because we're going head on, right? So they come over and they sniff. And I'm obviously still working on my correction with her tension. So she's all in and she's been great. But I don't want it to be a slippery slope. And I know that probably comes with the sit stays and the come commands and things like that, but just curious where that sort of what that cutoff is, how to correct in those situations.
Yeah. So, a good question. So we're going to start with the on-leash ones. So you're saying sometimes on-leash dogs are coming up to her. So if you're at a place, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the leash length, right? If you're in a position where on-leash dogs are able to come up to her while you're passing them, you're too close. Right. So you got to, again, general rule of thumb, right? If they lunge, they can't get to each other. That applies for the other dog too. Let's say this dog over here is on a 25-foot flexi lead, and I could tell that owner has that dog all over the place, right? They have no control over the dog. They're not doing anything. That means I need to equate for my 6-foot leash and that 25-foot leash, which means then I might cross the street, right? Or if I'm in a field, I may go way far away on the other side of the field, right? So as far as that one is concerned, on leash, there should never be a position where those dogs are able to approach in that case, right? So create more distance than at that, right?
And
if both, like, listen, if go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I walked into a store, which again, I've never really done with Melly before, and there was a little pug sitting there. And they just, like, the pug came right over to her, sniffed her. Melly was good, sniffed her. And then I was able to, like, pull her out of it. But, like, I know, I was in my head, I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. Like, but then I know it's a lot of advocating for Melly and myself as owners, because people, like, and it's so funny because before I would do it all day long, like, sorry, my dog, don't come near me and my dog, she's not friendly. And now that I know she, she is friendly, I'm like, okay, I have to give her these experiences to make sure they're controlled. Sure.
Yeah, and stores are tougher, obviously, because there's not as much ability to create distance. That being said, if I'm going to go into, say, a pet store where I know there might be other dogs, I'm so, like, hyper aware of my surroundings in that case. And if I'm in a checkout line or something and somebody in front of me has a dog, I'm going to be being that guy that is standing 9 feet away from them, getting back to the social distancing, right? So, so you just got to be aware of those types of things, right? And create distance. And if you can't create distance, you just got to be comfortable communicating with people, right? There's times that I'll be in that situation where there's physically no ability for me to create some space. And I could tell this person is going to just let their dog drag right over to mine. And I'll proactively tell them, hey, we're training right now, or something polite like that, to clearly give them a cue of, like, hey, please don't let your dog do that, right? So I always try to, like, I always go for the nonverbal reminders for people first of, again, if I'm creating distance, if I'm arcing off to the side, it's a pretty telltale sign that we don't want to interact right now. If I'm standing 10 feet behind you in a checkout line, it's a pretty clear sign that, we don't want to interact right now. But if I'm physically not able to do that, or the person is being too fast about it, so there's a couple of things with the off-leash situations. So it sounds like in your case, a lot of it is happening in, like, fields or areas where people are letting their dog run and, like, play with balls and stuff. It's not like you're just walking through the neighborhood and suddenly there's an off-leash dog. Okay.
It's happened. That has happened. Because I live in a, like, very, like, suburban neighborhood where there's houses everywhere and people will have their dogs, like, just out front off leash, and it's mostly little dogs because people think because they're not they're so small that they can't do anything, that it's fine that they charge at my dogs. That's happened before, not since training. But that's happened just walking down by people's houses. But these scenarios I'm speaking to were in open fields.
Okay. So less frequent with listen, if again, in the neighborhood, if it happens, since that one's going to happen hardly ever, my go-to for that is, I would say, like, our job is just to make sure that dog can't make contact. So sometimes I'll carry something on me, or just use my foot to block the dog until the owner's able to grab them, or just do whatever I need to do to block contact. In the off-leash settings, in, like, the fields and stuff. So a couple things, right? So obviously, and it sounds like you're already kind of doing this, but your best offense is a good defense, right? So I try to be aware of where I'm at. I know there's certain places in my neighborhood where people are more likely to let their dogs off leash than others. And if I'm going to go near those areas, I'm really hyper aware of my surroundings, or I'm creating a lot of space, right? And there's some places that I just don't go to because I know it's going to happen, right? If I go to this place, dogs are going to be charging at me, right? If it happens the handful of times like you're describing, where it's like got caught off guard, dog back there, something like that, dog's running up, your best thing you could do in that scenario, if you're in, like, a safe area, so you're in a field or something like that, there's not a ton of traffic and stuff nearby and everything, is your brain just needs to, until that owner goes and gets that dog, your brain needs to shift to, like, we're doing a social now, right? Because where most of the issue happens in that scenario is we panic. We go and we grab the dog because we're like, oh no, Melly, like, you don't react, or don't do this, or don't do that, right? And we go over and we grab her and try to pull her away from the other dog. And immediately she, like, something's wrong, right? Goes back to that reactive state of the tension on the leash, and then starts lunging or freaking out or something like that. Where in that exact scenario, let's say that dog runs up to her, she gets caught off guard, and we know she's not aggressive, right? this isn't an ideal situation. I didn't come into this scenario thinking we were going to be running a social, but now these dogs are interacting and I can't interrupt that interaction, right? That's kind of your key at that point, is we have to just allow it to happen for a minute. And as soon as they disengage from each other, grab them, move them away from each other at that point, right? And you could shift to, again, like, so if I'm running a social, right? My go-to is, again, supervise and just have my e-collar set all the way up as a just in case, right? So that situation happens. We're not going to panic. We're going to turn our e-collar up, obviously. We're going to allow that interaction to happen, and then we're going to remove them from each other.
Just for context, like that happened with us during training. Like there was a little doodly thing on a flexi that went like, we passed it and then it went like all the way around us and came back behind us, and we're like, I don't even know how this person, like how this even happened, but yeah, it happened, and we did the exact same thing.
Yeah, and in that situation, because both dogs were on a leash in that situation, I think I was walking behind Eva and I was able to just kind of take my foot and just kind of move the dog away, right? So just kind of intervene and just like stick it right in between them, and that worked out fine, obviously. But yeah, I mean, obviously I don't advocate like going and like doing play dates with random dogs in fields and stuff like that. But if it happens, it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like there's some clients, like I had a client that came in around the same time I was telling Eva about, that was in from Colorado, and her neighborhood, it's just dogs off leash everywhere, like literally everywhere, right? And there's no avoiding it. And it's like, my go-to is like, hey, don't let it happen, but it's like, it's gonna happen, right? So we had to train the dog for those pictures, and we started doing, hey, like when you go into these settings where there's off-leash dogs, this is how we do it properly. This is how we socialize the dog in that setting if it comes to it, to make sure nothing bad happens, right? So you got to have your contingency plan in place as far as those types of things. That scenario, right? Like your mom's cottage, 3 doors down, the neighbor dog comes over and they start interacting. If you want to let them interact for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, like I don't, you know what I mean? Like it's not really going to be the end of the world. Again, the reason why we're so strict on like dogs and trust is just to make sure nothing bad happens from the standpoint of the other dog doesn't do anything, because in a lot of cases people don't know their own dog well enough. But like I said, it's not necessarily wrong to, you know what I mean? So if you wanted to let them interact a little bit at that point, and then whenever you wanted to disengage, I want to make sure always, if my dog is interacting with another dog, I could focus them back on me if need be, right? So that's a situation where I would give come command, right? If she doesn't listen to the come command, I would give my correction for that, right? And I would make sure that even when you're in this heightened state of playing, that you could still disengage and focus back on me if need be.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Would that be part of like building recall training too? Like where they have really high level?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't. Yeah, we didn't get super crazy into recall training, but she knows the come command well enough where you could start implementing that, obviously. And you could even start with just teaching her to disengage, right? So sometimes what I'll do with dogs and socials to start that process is, let's say she's playing, right? I'll give her name, right? Which name typically means I just want you to check in with me. There's not really an expectation other than that. And if she doesn't disengage and be responsive to my voice and check in with me, I'll just give my correction for that, right? And start to shape that process of, if I start engaging with you, if I start talking to you, I need you to check in with me also. And then from there, it's pretty easy to shape the rest of the come command in with that, But the hardest part is getting them to like take that brain that's really engaged in doing this and get them to like shift it away for a second.
Yeah. She gets very fixated when she gets to play with dogs now. It's like, she's like all up in them. So it's very cute, but it's very funny. The other dogs are like, I get to do this all the time. Like, I don't know why you're being so crazy.
Awesome. Well, just recapping a couple of things here, right? So again, walking, I want you to have a little bit more strict of a criteria as far as some of the sniffing and stuff. And I would really highlight when she's in the come command, any sniffing or pulling out of that position, I would like to see you just get that under control, right? The reactivity stuff, again, it's kind of bleeds into all these types of things, obviously much higher level. Like you're probably still going to wind up in the 70, 80, 90 range for some of those things, Again, if it's lower, it's lower, but I wouldn't be surprised if you wind up in that range to just get it the rest of the way under control. Car reactivity, I want to see you get under control, obviously. We talked about how to handle the off-leash dogs. The on-leash dogs, create a little bit more space, obviously. Make sure you're advocating for how much space the dogs can get, obviously. And if you do those things, I think you should be moving even more in the right direction with stuff.
Amazing. Thank you. I know I've said this to Eva a million times, but the health of Melly and probably too much information, but like in her bowel movements and everything, like she is just a completely different dog because she's so much more relaxed and just happy. Like people used to literally comment on the amount that she panted on walks, and it's like we can go on 45-minute walks, hour walks, we walk downtown, we go in stores. Like it's been a complete 180 and just such a good lifestyle for both of us. So can't thank you enough. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
Now a subscriber and listener to your podcast and all the things. So I appreciate everything that you're doing with dogs and all the help that you've done with Melly. So thank you.
What is going on?
It's doing pretty well.
Hi, buddy.
It's doing pretty well.
Where are we at with stuff? We talked, I think it was a week or so ago. You said better, still some issues here and there. Where are you guys kind of at?
It's pretty manageable.
Okay.
The barking, no real redirected aggression anymore, which has been really nice.
Yeah, he's much better. Like overall, we have a lot fewer reactions.
Sure.
We still sometimes have them, and we don't know why. Like why this dog when you just have 6 other dogs and there's no issue. But when he does react, it's more barking, and I'm no longer afraid I'm going to get bit.
Yeah.
He does
Well, that's good.
Which is a lot better.
Have you guys been using the bonker on the walk?
Oh, yeah.
And how does he respond? Like, let's say you do need to correct. Does he stop right away still like he was last time?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Are you correcting when he barks but doesn't lunge?
I don't take the bonker all the time. Kyle does it.
You do, okay.
I try and do preemptive treats, and that sometimes works.
That's fine.
Well.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if it were, oh, here we go. Perfect, perfect test here. Oh, come on. That's fine. Listen, you know, if we could use the, you know, I'm all for pumping him up with those rewards like we were seeing last time. So if you could keep his attention on you with them, totally fine. But if it does turn into the barking, I would still make sure you're correcting for it. Now, additionally, I would start at least for, let's say, the next 3 or 4 weeks, start at least just taking this on your walks, because in a lot of cases, the visual of you just having this with you, very loud, the visual of you having this with you a lot of times is enough of a deterrent in itself, where you may find he's even a little bit more on his P's and Q's, you know? Now, do you find, have you guys compared it all? Does he do it more with you versus you, or you versus you, or? Okay. That's okay. Well, a lot of it could be, you know, the bonker is really where we started to see a lot of the success with him. So if you haven't consistently been taking it, he may, what are you doing there, dude?
He actually loves eating leaves.
Yeah, I see that.
So,
you're really going to town. But that may be some of the reason why you may be seeing a little bit more of that. So like I said, maybe in your case, I would try for at least the next couple of weeks to be a little bit more consistent about at least bringing it and seeing if you see a difference. And if you really need to, given that correction. So that might be a good way to start. But what I want to do today is just do one last big walk around, kind of see where we're at with things. Obviously, we're kind of nearing the end of the season here, but it's a nice day out, so we should see some dogs, and we got a nice weekend coming up, so you'll get a little bit more good practice in with him. Outside of the walking, anything else that you guys can think of? You have any questions on with him, or it's been pretty good?
I wanted to talk about grooming.
Sure.
So normally one of us sits with a cup of food, and someone brushes him, and he like gets treats.
You're talking when just the two of you are doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like, so because he's a doodle, so he has to get brushed all the time. So one of us rewards him and the other brushes him, but he really doesn't like being groomed. Okay. He's kind of like baby sharks a lot, where he's like, get away from me. How do you I mean, so other than the treats for using the collar?
Well, the problem is, and this kind of goes hand in hand with what you were talking about when you were saying you're like preemptively using the rewards to distract them from the other dogs. When we're looking at counter conditioning something, which is kind of the technical term for, you know, using rewards to create a positive association with something, a lot of people make the mistake of they use it as either a bribe or a distraction, which is not what we want to do. The dog's never actually learning anything if we're distracting them from it. What we want to do is we want to create a positive association through having the dog, or by rewarding for the correct behavior in the presence of the distraction. You know what I mean? So there's some techniques as far as how we can go about implementing that, and we'll have some time when we get back to the house after the walk. I could show you some ways to kind of do that.
Yeah, we just kind of feed him Yeah. Really, like, please don't bite us.
Which is again, that's the way of distracting, which understandably, obviously, but we want to make sure that we're rewarding the correct behavior first. Oh, we got a bunch of dogs out today. Look at that. And same deal in these cases, like if he's doing well, go for it with the rewards too.
Yeah, we've been giving like one per dog when he's close.
Sure.
When he starts preemptively looking at you,
it's fine.
Where is my treat?
Listen, that's totally fine.
Good.
Now, also, don't get too hung up on the like one per dog thing either. Now, I don't think you need to do 20 per dog by any means, but until you guys really feel like you're still having, you know, we're like 90% there, you know, but we still got a little bit to do with him. So until we're really fully there, we want to reinforce as much as possible the correct behavior, you know. It's like almost like we're creating a whole like engagement session around the dogs, right? Like when you see the other dogs, like all the good stuff in the world is coming from me kind of mentality. This is great.
And then what about
yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it is much better.
I mean, it's night and day from the first time I came here, that's for sure. Yeah. The biggest thing, especially like I said, because we're coming into winter, you're not going to have as many opportunities to work on it, as you still want to make sure you're going into every time you take them out prepared to address it, right? Because since there's less opportunities for you guys to see it, what can sometimes happen is when we miss one opportunity, we don't have another opportunity for another week and a half. So you can kind of see a lot of regression by missing just that one because there's not as many repetitions.
Not letting them like run to the door.
Sure.
Make them go to a place or sit, and it's been effective. And then the other thing that I've just tried to be like a lot more mindful is like every time I let them out, making them sit at the door and not like crowd the door. So just kind of some simple boundaries. And I think we're getting, you know, we're better. We're not there.
Sure.
I don't typically. I mean, well, historically, I haven't typically like had them wear their e-collar all day every day. So it's obviously much more effective when they're wearing.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, like I will say, like I've seen some improvements, like when they're not, you know, just doing what I'm asking, sitting, or I mean, his bed, her sit. I feel like I probably should take the leap and make her, give her a bed command. It's kind of a good one.
Sure. Okay.
But I haven't done that.
That's all right. Well, what I want to do today is make sure that the come command looks good with them, like we ended with last time. Assuming that looks good, yeah, we could take a look at the bed command, or maybe we might get into a little bit of leash walking and stuff with them. We'll see. We'll kind of see what we got to work on. I want to see you work them. So I haven't had you do a whole lot with them up until this point. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll through all three of those commands with both of them one at a time here. Now today they're working very, very low. We're at like a 5 for pretty much everything. Now the reason for that is obviously we've worked through all the nonsense, right? So it's more of a reminder in this setting than anything. So I'm going to give you this. Why don't you start with him? I'll give you this. And what I want to see you do is you're going to do some bed stays, then you're going to do some sit stays, then you're going to do some come commands. And you can do them in whichever order you want to. Obviously, you start with either the bed or the sit first, though. And we're going to be giving a reward at the beginning of each position. So once we put them into command, tell them good, and then give a reward for that. Now, if he breaks position at any point, you would tell him no, give a correction, then you would walk him all the way back to that same spot. collar back. And we're gonna make a couple little adjustments to what you just did there. Okay, so all in all, looked okay. There's a couple little details I wanna fine tune here, right? So, obviously the bed one, we talked about that already, right? A little closer to the bed. Additionally, what I like to do is wherever I give that bed command, I stop. That's how we start to create the distance we're sending, right? So if every single time I'm working bed, right, I'm saying like bed, and then I take him all the way over, he's gonna be contingent on my motion going to that bed, right? He's never actually learning, truly going away to it, right? Okay, so, you know, how I start to get further and further is I go bed, good, right? And wherever I give that command, at that point, it's your job to finish that position, right? Good. Second thing, when we're rewarding, okay, you were kind of changing up how you were rewarding a few times, meaning sometimes you rewarded at the beginning of the command, so using the bed as the example, bed, good. Sometimes you rewarded there. Sometimes you waited to reward until you came back, and neither are wrong, right? Here's my logic behind it, right? I'm either going to do at the beginning of the command or I'm gonna do both. And the reason for that is because really the rewards job is to increase the likelihood of you going to that bed, right? So with that in mind, I wanna give that reward the second you finish the position to speed it up, right? I want you more eager to get into position because the reward's coming faster. Really what's holding them on the bed is the correction. You know what I mean? Yes, the reward is helping, right? But the correction is really what's gonna keep him there, right?
It totally makes sense.
So that's one thing. Additionally, again, just little nuanced details. Keep in mind, our good we're using, it's just a marker, right? It's not what's actually telling him like, good job, like you're doing a really good job, right? So I try to keep it simple, right? It's a mark, meaning I want that to come at a precise time. Okay. So in this case, the second he completes command, what is completed command? 4 paws on the bed, right? We don't care about sit or down or anything on it. So, bed, good. Notice that mark came right there. Told him that exact thing is what you're about to get rewarded for. From there, take my time going over, giving him a treat for that, and he's gonna know that treat's for whatever he was doing when he heard good, right? And what that does is that helps you get off of you were really doing this a lot.
Yeah.
You had the hand like glued in the pouch, right?
I haven't done the treat.
No, it's totally fine. Yeah.
So it is like, it's a really awkward, like, I don't know the timing.
It's totally fine. And this is why I want to just go over the reasons why we do it this way, so you can understand it, right? It helps you kind of be more aware of it, right? So that's one of the biggest things. Okay, and that was correlating to pretty much all the positions you did. So reward at the beginning of the command, clear good marker, right, at the second they complete the position, and then reward comes after the marker, right? Second detail, you were switching between using okay and free. So, you know, and it was,
at home I do free.
well, you know what's funny is you were consistent about how you were doing it, meaning, right, you used okay for the beds and for the sits, and you used free for the comes.
I'm glad I had it.
Right? So you had some consistency behind it. We'll just kind of, we'll pick one, right? I'll tell you, like I said, I don't care if you use free or not. I think okay is just easy, whatever. It's up to you, I don't care, right? It really does not matter that much, right? So what I wanna see you do is, we'll use him, because he's a little easier for this. I want you to, yeah, we'll trade. Here, I'll come around here, I'll take her from you. I wanna see you do the 3 more bed stays here, making those couple adjustments that I just talked about.
Bed.
Perfect.
Good.
Excellent. I'm gonna make one more adjustment here. That'll look good. This is one I didn't mention yet, right? So I'll use her to show you this, right? Bed. Good. So watch the difference here. So when you're going back, you're grabbing the leash like here, right? See how that almost like makes her wanna, you know what I mean, right? So when I do it,
just go for the end.
yes. Bed. Good. When I do it, I always go for the handle. And see how much more stable that was? Straight up with it. If I'm picking up and if I'm going, that promotes motion, right? That's like, hey, we're going, right? This is we're staying stationary still, right?
It's
so
like simplifying.
It's simplifying things. Yeah, and all these things, the reason why this stuff is important is because the better our handling is, right? The better our timing is with things, the more clear our communication is, less mistakes the dog makes, the less they need to get corrected for it, the more confident they become, right?
If I'm going to treat at the end of the command, what's the timing?
Well, so there's a lot of ways you could do it. Technically speaking, when you get into your good marker, right? Good meaning continue doing what you're doing and you're going to get a reward for it. The use of it is to reward at the highest point of distance or distraction. Meaning, right? In this case, in the process of me going back and getting the leash, what's the highest point of distraction?
Coming in, right?
Kind of. Picking up the leash. That's usually where dogs make the mistake, right? Is when we pick up that leash, they want to get up, right? So technically, with that in mind, I would pick up leash, good, reward. Right? That's how I do it. Okay. It's not wrong.
But be consistent.
No, be consistent, yes. Okay. Again, it's not wrong either way. I found that's the best point because what you're doing is you're rewarding for them staying there, but additionally you're continuing to counter condition us picking up that leash, which is where 99% of dogs struggle, right? Now, again, highest point of distance or distraction, that also could be, let's say, I'm doing duration and suddenly somebody comes pounding on that door over there and she holds that position. Good, right? Highest point of distraction at that point, right? So it can change. You could reward at all sorts of different points, but the use of it is to reinforce that. Okay. All right, so I want you to do 2 more with him, adding that additional detail into things. Much better.
Okay. Sit.
Nice. It's pretty good. It ended so zen. Felt so chill. Not just him. She did great at the end there as well. What I was getting at is just the way you were communicating was so much just calmer and more clear, and you could see the change in their energy as you were doing it, you know? That looked really great. They picked up on all those last things really well. You know, obviously you could work some bed stays with her, but my biggest thing I would like to see you work on in the next week is just your overall timing with everything and focusing on those little details, and you're gonna notice a big difference just in those little details, right? So the cool thing is, all of their obedience, check, looks good, right? There's nothing else that we need to teach. I mean, they have all the basics, you know, they understand it. You can tell you understand how to do it. You'll get some practice in with it, obviously. So our next few sessions here will all be just proofing. We'll do some distractions, some socialization, things like that, obviously. But as far as the things we went over today, is there anything you have any questions on? Or do you have any questions on anything else that's unrelated to what we did today?
Oh, okay, so like with her, so this talking, right?
Yeah.
Like I know, like, okay, not necessarily good, not necessarily bad.
Yeah.
Right? Energy of either anxiety, happiness, or whatever. Is it like, I've never thought I should correct her.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
No, because we've seen it get better as we've communicated more clearly with her and held her to a better expectation. I am not a big fan of correcting for whining, you know? Unless it's so deliberate, like, but I'm seeing a dog that, again, still just needs good direction. And I think in a lot of cases when people start correcting, like over the top with the whining and stuff like that, you wind up almost just making it worse sometimes. Not saying it's not fine to sometimes, but that's not gonna be your solution with this.
Okay. No, I mean, that's my gut. I mean,
Yeah.
and overall, like, she doesn't do it at home.
Yeah, yeah.
When we turn into the metro parks,
Yeah.
she knows we're in the metro. You know, like,
yeah.
when we're getting close to, like, grandma and grandpa's house,
sure.
she knows. So, the only...
It's arousal, you know, it's some anxiety, obviously, but...
Positive association.
Sure.
The one exception is the vet, but, like, correcting her in the vet, like, seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, well, again, it's not that. It's not that like, oh, well, she's scared, so why would I correct her because she's scared? She's anxious, so why would I correct her when she's anxious? It has nothing to do with that. It simply has to do with the fact that I don't think she will know what she's getting corrected for. You know what I mean? Sometimes when you get to like some of these shepherds and stuff that just like frantically whine or make noise and stuff like that, it's like, it's almost subconscious. You know what I mean? Like they're just like cycling and this thing is just happening, but they're not focused on this, right? They're focused on what they're doing in that moment. So it's like they'll be getting this correction and they won't correlate it to this. They'll just be correlating it to the thing they're doing, but they're not really doing anything wrong. So they can't figure it out. So sometimes it makes it, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, that tracks. I mean,
yeah. Okay. If she were whining and then jumping all over you, oh, we would correct the shit out of that, right? You know, regardless of if she's anxious or fearful and that's why she's doing it, right? But that's because that's a physical thing she could look at and be, that thing I did right there is what that correction was for.
Jumped up on you.
Yes.